which takes too long to learn. Most people do not stick around judo long enough to see how effective the art is. And let's be honest, tachiwaza is very, very hard to learn. Okay, so we got to reverse engineer it. We got to do more nawaza. We got to understand how a fight happens, and we got to take how judo can answer certain issues in a fight. That means we got to bring judo back to fighting in the sense that typical fight, overhand, cross, double, single, whatever. And if you look at Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, they address all these issues. Okay, they reverse engineered it. Okay, what happened is once we get too good, once organizers get too big, then you have to kind of like keep on building that organization, and then you forget to reverse engineer things. You forget to ask questions, and that's what happened to judo. We got too big. You know, judo. If you look up black belt magazines from 1960s, half the magazine was about judo. Okay, judo was one of the first martial arts that was introduced to America, because when the GI came back from Japan, the only martial art available at that time after World War II was judo and kendo. And then around after 1960s, karate got introduced. Okay, but that's the first martial art was judo, and so judo had this uniqueness. Oh, you know, it's the first American art, but fuck, we never got entrenched. It never got established in America, and now we're dying. Okay, and so I hope all the judokas out there understand that. All right, and just one more thing. I find that there's a lot of elitism going on. I'm not going to address that yet. I might address that in another video. But I find there's a lot of elitism going on in the judo community, right? Especially the old timers. They feel like, well, I've been doing this forever. I have my own little club. I have my 30, 40 students, and I'm happy doing that. Well, you know what? What happened when you retire or you die? Your club's going to disappear like that. You know, it's going to disappear within a month, 2 months, right? And that's really sad for judo. So the old timers out there, please take what I say with a grain of salt and say, you know what? You know, this guy brought up a lot of good point, you know what I mean? And kind of let it flow a little bit, kind of like, you know, take what the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu guys are doing, you know what I mean? Like start introducing more nawaza, maybe create a certification system or ranking system uniquely to nawaza, you know what I mean? So almost equivalent to like, you know, that flesh, like, you know how I talked about how when you got to a blue belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or even purple belt, back in 2000, you can go and open your own school. Well, let's just say you have some kid who trained with you, some college kid. He did 4 years of judo with you. Okay, so he's only a brown belt or black belt, and so he goes up and starts his own judo school, but he doesn't feel confident enough teaching judo flows. So you say, no problem, Johnny. You know, open up your judo school, but emphasize nawaza. You get what I'm saying? And so if we spend 80% of the time doing one nawaza is very easy to learn. So in other words, you're going to compress that. So when someone walks off the street, you have lots of stuff to teach them because you're able to teach a lot of nawaza. Tachiwaza, freaking, I can spend a whole month doing Uchimata, because Uchimata took so long to learn, right? So if some stranger walks off the street, am I going to spend 6 months teaching them Uchimata? No, they're going to get bored. They're going to get bored. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? But if you teach them all these nawaza moves, right? Every night they come into your class, they're like, man, I'm getting my money's worth because tonight I'm learning how to do a arm bar, you know, Juji-Katami, now I'm doing Yudo-Gurami, now I'm doing Kimura, I'm doing all these, you know, their mind's blown, right? And because they think they're getting the money's worth, all right? Another thing we need to do in the judo community is that we need to start charging people for money, all right? We think that, oh, because we don't charge people for money, you know, because Jigoro Kano said that we need to make it non-profit. You know what? People are stupid. You know, the minute you don't charge them money, they think what you offer is not valuable. You know what I mean? And you got to charge people for money. And I'm not saying charge like lots of money, you know what I mean? But you got to charge people money. Okay, so think of ways to make judo aspirational. All right, because I know it's very taboo. You can't charge people money, but you got to, because if you don't, judo will die in America, right? So maybe charge people some money. You know, you got to make people pay something, because if you don't, people don't see value in what you do. You know, and that's not good. You know. Anyways, I think I might shoot another video if I have more to say, but these are things that's in my mind. You know what I mean? Hopefully hopefully some of these things, hopefully other judokas or judo instructors hear what I'm saying and give me some feedback or implement some suggestions I have. I know, what's his name? Several guys. There's freestyle judo, so he's going that route where it's like emphasizing more newaza. It's almost like wrestling. They have all these judo throws that are not legal anymore in judo tournaments. The whole judo, all these like penalties and all these throws you can't do anymore. That's the sport of judo, right? And what happens when you introduce a sport, you have to make the sport unique. You have to make the sport spectator friendly. So it just keeps on evolving, right? And I'm not interested in that. I'm more interested in what makes judo effective so that my guy can win a fight or my guy can win an MMA fight, right? Or, you know what I mean? So I'm not going to let organization dictate what is judo, Judo is basically a way of approaching a system, a way of fighting, okay? I'm not interested in how organization dictate how I should teach judo or what is judo because their bottom line is the sport. I'm not interested in that. Okay, so that's another thing that the judo community is getting really mixed up about. They're like, man, I'm gonna teach these kids how to do judo, and we can't teach these judo throws because these throws are not legal anymore in judo tournament. This is how you need to do this judo throw because if you do it this way, it's wrong. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, they weren't really too concerned about that. For example, the IBJJF, International Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu Federation, I think didn't came about till don't quote me on this, until recently, right? For the longest time, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu was like the Wild Wild West. People were just doing whatever they felt like doing. There's so many different variety of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, you know what I mean? And then as Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu got really popular, someone capitalized on that and said, you know what, let's create an organization, International Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu Federation. And once that organization got created, you know what's happening now? So many rules are introduced. And now you have BJJ school who only want to compete in that organization. And so the whole school revolves around fighting or training in that way so that the students will win those tournaments. So they're neglecting the self-defense, they're neglecting a certain way of doing things because it's not productive for them when they enter those tournaments. Right? And so that's the same thing that we're doing in judo. And I think that's a mistake. 90% of judokas will not compete at the national level. Most judokas might enter a couple tournaments and say, fuck that, I'm not doing it anymore. Okay? So we're not talking about the young kid, we're talking about the average recreational judoka. So let's make judo fun again. Forget about all these rules and stuff like that. Once again, make it aspirational. The guys who want to compete, pull them aside and say, okay, you want to compete, then you have to play by these rules. The average Joe, teach them maybe 10 judo throws at the most. You know what I mean? And let's start teaching them wrestling version of judo throws. Morite geri, double leg takedown, single leg takedown, kataguruma, fireman carry. You know what I mean? You have so many wrestlers who come off the street and we treat them like the redhead stepchild. No, embrace that. Embrace them. Say, hey, you know what? Whenever a wrestler comes to my MMA school, I open up my arms and say, man, I love you guys. Wrestling is like the cousin of judo. Did you know? And I tell them, hey, you know how to do the double leg? That's called morite geri. You already know a judo move. You know how to do the fireman carry? That's great. That's called kataguruma. You already know a judo move. You know how to do the head and arm throw? I go, that's great. That's the ongoshi. That's another judo throw. And now the wrestler's thinking, shit, I know judo. It's like, yes, you know judo. You know what I mean? You know how to do the jab throw or the single arm throw? Yes, that's called ippon suronagi. You know how to do the inside leg trip? Yes, that's good. That's called ochigiri. You know how to do the sweep? That's kochigiri. They're like, holy shit. They're like, man, do you know how to do the wizard, the whip down, whatever? It's like flying mirror. It's like, yes. I go, yes, that's another judo throw. So now their mind's like, and then I tell them, hey, you have to do your wrestling throw, but you have to throw it like a judo guy. And then I'll give you a ranking, or, you know what I mean? And they're like, yes, I found my cousin. It's like visiting another country and you found out that you have a cousin. And it's like, man, I have a cousin that can stay with. You know what I mean? That's another thing we don't do. We don't embrace wrestlers. Fuck, wrestling is so popular now because of MMA, and So many college kids and high school kids do wrestling. And when they're in off season, they don't even think about judo. They go to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu school. That's great. But you know what? Judo can offer the same thing as Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. You know, we have the stand-up portion of judo that is so similar to wrestling. You know what I mean? There's so many guys that are good in judo and wrestling. Jimmy Pedro, I think, had a scholarship for wrestling for Brown University. You know what I mean? And so, so I encourage other judokas out there to pick up a wrestling book and say, hey, this is a wrestling throw. We have the same throw in judo. Analyze it. Figure out how a wrestler does it differently than judoka, because the sport is different. And then somehow bridge the gap, somehow reward the wrestler when they come in with that. And now, because you have to remember, most wrestlers train wrestling from all through their school. You know, maybe they did it for 4 years, 12 years even. Some wrestling kids start as young as like 5 years old. You know, you have college wrestlers, all American and shit like that. They've been doing wrestling for 10 years. They come to your judo club. If you can somehow get them to stay, they're going to be a great ambassador for your sport. They can be the gatekeeper. Some asshole walks in the judo club, you say, go against my student. And they don't know that your student has 10 years of wrestling. Your students will tear those guys up. Okay? So I think judoka should actively recruit wrestlers. And this is the best time to recruit wrestlers, because Ronda Rousey is tearing up the scene. Ronda Rousey is beating up wrestlers. Ronda Rousey is out wrestling wrestlers. Okay? There are so many judo throws that are so similar to wrestling. You know what I mean? And we should be like the Russian. You know, the Russian, what they do is they will have judo, sambo, wrestling. And then during off season, these guys will just train with each other. So their mind is free to understand how to grapple, because they're fighting against other grapplers who have a unique or a different way of entering into that throw. And then during in season, they will get back into their sport and specialize in their sport. And so for the longest time, the Russian would just kick everyone's butt, because their understanding of that sport was so unique, right? And the secret was because there's this inter-exchange of information, right? So I think that's something that judo clubs don't understand what to do. You know, we need to embrace wrestlers. But we also have to teach them the culture and the spirit of wrestling. And when we do that, and they accept that, you're going to have a really good judoka.